After 10 years, man reunites with his lost dog. What happens next will break your heart. William Thompson walked with his head down through the city park of Boulder as the light rain soaked his thin jacket. At 68, loneliness had become his most faithful companion since his wife had passed away. It was then that his tired eyes spotted a drenched golden retriever sitting alone in the rain. William's heart skipped a beat. Those eyes, that distinctive spot on the left ear, could it be? After 10 long years, could this be his Duke, the puppy who disappeared during their move to New York City? With trembling hands, the retired man crouched down and made the special whistle only his dog would recognize. The animal, initially wary, tilted its head to the side. Suddenly its ears perked up, and with a hesitant movement it approached. William held out his hands, holding his breath. The dog sniffed his fingers, and in that instant something shifted in its gaze. With a bark that seemed to hold 10 years of longing, the animal leaped onto the elderly man, licking his face as its tail wagged wildly. "Duke, is it really you, old friend?" William whispered, his voice choked with emotion, hugging the dog as if afraid it might vanish again. Passers-by in the park slowed their steps to watch the unusual scene. A grey-haired man and a soaked golden retriever embracing as if nothing else in the world existed. No one could grasp the depth of that moment, except Margaret Wilson, a woman walking with her red umbrella who recognized William from the neighboring building. "Mr. Thompson, are you all right?" she asked, stepping closer cautiously. Lifting his face, wet from both rain and tears, William smiled as he hadn't in years. "Margaret, it's him, it's Duke, my dog who disappeared 10 years ago when I moved to NYC. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "But how is that possible? After all this time?" "I don't know, but I'm sure it's him. Look at this spot on his left ear, the way he tilts his head." William stroked the dog's wet fur as Duke refused to leave his side for even a second. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. The reunion in the park was just the beginning of a journey that would bring more emotion than William could have imagined. With his heart racing and completely ignoring the falling rain, he took Duke to his small third-floor apartment in the historic downtown of Boulder. After drying off, William watched the dog's every move, noticing new scars, fur less shiny than before, and a slight difficulty moving. Still, Duke wouldn't stop following him, as if afraid to lose him again. "We need to be absolutely sure, my friend," William murmured, picking up the phone to call Jennifer, his daughter who lived in Hoboken. "And we need to take care of you." When Jennifer answered, William's voice faltered repeatedly as he tried to explain the unexplainable. On the other end of the line, his daughter alternated between shock and concern. "Dad, are you sure after 10 years?" she asked cautiously. "Remember how many times you thought you'd found Duke, like that Labrador last year?" "This time is different, Jen. It's him, I'm sure," William insisted, looking at Duke, who had settled at his feet, as if he'd never left. "I need to take him to the vet, check for a microchip, see how his health is." "All right, Dad. I'll ask Robert to pick you up. He's heading to Boulder for work this afternoon. Don't go out in this rain again." After hanging up, William sat on the floor next to Duke, remembering the fateful day he had lost him. It was October 2015, and he had just retired from the textile factory where he'd worked for 35 years. With his pension reduced, he was forced to sell his house in Woodstock and accept a smaller apartment offered by his daughter in New York City. During the trip, they stopped at a gas station, and in the chaos of the movie, Duke ran off, frightened by the noise of a truck. "We searched for weeks. Went back to that gas station every day," William whispered, stroking the dog's ears. "I put ads in the papers, visited shelters, offered a reward. How did you survive all this time, my friend? Where have you been?" The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the building manager, with her perpetually stern expression and the condo regulations in hand. "Mr. Thompson, I've heard you brought a large dog into the apartment," she said, craning her neck to peek inside. "You know the rules prohibit animals over 10 pounds. William felt a tightness in his chest. He hadn't considered this possibility. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is a special case. This dog is Duke. He disappeared 10 years ago and I just found him by some miracle. I can't just... Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson, the manager interrupted, adjusting her thick-framed glasses. You have 48 hours to find another place for him, or I'll have to take administrative action. After she left, William sat on the couch, feeling the weight of his 68 years. Duke approached, resting his head on his knee just as he used to when he sensed his sadness. The simple gesture brought tears to the old man's eyes. I won't lose you again, my friend, not a chance. 3 hours later, Robert, his son-in-law, parked his car in front of the building. A practical middle-aged man, he eyed the golden retriever skeptically as it hesitantly climbed into the back seat. Dad, do you really think this is Duke? He asked while driving to the vet clinic. Dogs of this breed look alike, and it's been so long. When you have a child, Robert, even if decades pass, you'd recognize them anywhere, William replied simply, turning to check on Duke in the back. At the Happy Paws Veterinary Clinic, the young Dr. Sarah Campbell greeted them with a kind smile, listening intently to William's unbelievable story. Though she maintained a professional demeanor, the emotion in her eyes was visible as she scanned Duke for a microchip. The quiet office was then filled with the beep of the scanner. The vet looked at the screen, then at William, her eyes wide. Mr. Thompson, the chip is registered under William James Thompson in 2012, she said, her voice trembling. It's really you. This is truly your Duke. William sank into a nearby chair, sobbing like a child. Robert, incredulous, checked the data on the screen. But this is impossible. How does a dog survive 10 years alone? Where has he been? How did he get to Boulder from that gas station on Interstate 87? Dr. Sarah continued the physical exam, her expression growing increasingly serious. Mr. Thompson, Duke is malnourished and dehydrated. He has some old injuries that healed poorly, fleas, and I'm noticing concerning respiratory and heart issues. We'll need to run more tests, she hesitated, looking at the old man with concern. The necessary treatments might be costly. William straightened his shoulders, renewed determination in his eyes. No matter the cost, Doctor. I sold my house, gave up many things in life, but I won't give up on him. Not again. Robert cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Father-in-law, with all due respect, your retirement barely covers your own expenses, and there's the issue of the building that doesn't accept pets. I'll figure something out. William cut in, stroking Duke, who, even weakened, kept his eyes fixed on him. Dr. Sarah suggested they leave Duke hospitalized for hydration and initial tests, promising to have a full diagnosis by the next morning. The separation, even if temporary, was painful, with Duke whining anxiously as he watched William walk away. I'll be back tomorrow, my friend. I promise, said William, fighting the urge to simply grab the dog and run. The next morning, after a sleepless night, William met with the vet, who confirmed his fears. Duke had a severe heart condition that would require continuous medication and possibly surgery. The total costs could easily exceed $10,000. How long does he have without treatment? William asked, his voice barely audible. It's hard to say. A few months, maybe less if his condition worsens, the vet replied, regretfully. On the way home, with Duke by his side again, William made desperate mental calculations. His small savings, set aside for his own medical emergencies, didn't even reach $5,000. His pension barely covered rent, food, and medicine, and there was still the issue with the building. But it's not fair, William burst out loud, startling Duke, who shrank back in the taxi seat. Sorry, my friend, not at you. When he arrived at his building, William received a disapproving look from the doorman. He quickly took the stairs, avoiding the elevator where he might run into other residents. Once inside his apartment, he sat at the kitchen table and pulled a shoebox from the top cabinet. Inside were important documents, including the paperwork from when he bought Duke in 2012, when the dog was just a puppy. Among the yellowed papers, he found something he'd forgotten, an old business card for Charles Edward Blackwell, a retired vet who had been his neighbor in Woodstock and helped him choose Duke. If anyone could advise him, it was his old friend. 3 rings later, a hoarse voice answered. Hello? Charles Edward speaking. Charles? It's William from Woodstock. William Thompson, remember me?" There was a pause, followed by an excited exclamation. "Billy, of course I remember. The man who moved to NYC and left his friends behind," the vet joked. "What? A wonderful surprise. How's life?" "Charles, you won't believe what happened." William then recounted the miraculous reunion with Duke, the dog's medical condition, and his financial and housing dilemma. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "That's extraordinary," Charles murmured after a long silence. "In 40 years as a vet, I've never heard anything like it. And you're absolutely sure it's the same dog?" The microchip confirmed it, Charles. "It's my Duke." The retired vet made a thoughtful noise. "About the heart condition, I know a foundation in Boulder that helps senior pets. They might cover part of the treatment. As for the building," Charles paused. "I have an idea, but I'd need your permission to make a few calls. Can I call you back in a few hours?" William barely had time to thank him before his friend hung up. He looked at Duke, who had found his old blanket in the box of things William had never been able to throw away, and was now resting on it, as if that decade of separation had never happened. The phone rang again just 2 hours later. "Billy, I've got news," Charles announced, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "First, I spoke with the Golden Paws Foundation. They agreed to cover 60% of Duke's treatment costs, considering the exceptional nature of the case." William felt his legs weaken with relief. "Charles, I don't even know how to thank you. Wait, there's more. Remember Helen, my niece who worked in social services? She now runs an animal-assisted therapy program for seniors and people with disabilities in Boulder. When I told her your story, she was fascinated and wants to talk to you. If Duke is approved for the program, you'd receive a monthly stipend for his care, and in return you'd participate in therapy sessions at nursing homes and hospitals. But Duke is sick. Can he really do this? Once he's stabilized, yes, and believe me, the therapeutic effect of being with you again will work wonders for his health. As for the condo issue, Helen knows the law well. Therapy animals have legal protection, and the condo won't be able to prevent Duke from staying if he's officially registered in the program." For the first time in 2 days, William allowed himself a deep sigh of relief. There was light at the end of the tunnel. The next morning, William met Helen Blackwell at Mountain Flavor, a charming cafe near the town square of Boulder. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair tied in a bun, she didn't seem the least bit surprised to see Duke lying obediently at William's feet. "When my uncle told me this story, I knew immediately I had to meet you both," Helen declared after introductions, leaning down to pet Duke. "In 20 years of working with animal-assisted therapy, I've never heard anything so extraordinary." "Believe me, I still can't quite believe it myself," William admitted, watching as Duke, usually wary of strangers, seemed perfectly at ease with Helen. "I'm still trying to understand how he survived all these years, where he was, who took care of him." Helen nodded understandingly. "It's a piece of fate that may never fully come together, but what matters is that you're reunited." She opened a folder she'd brought. "About the program, Mr. Thompson, we first need to evaluate Duke's condition and get veterinary clearance. After that, there's a short training for both of you. Visits usually happen twice a week for about 2 hours." William listened carefully as Helen explained the program details. Apparently, the demand for therapy animals was enormous, especially in Boulder, a city with a large elderly population. "The most amazing part is that it usually takes us months to train the animals. But from what my uncle told me, Duke was already extremely well-behaved and sociable before he went missing," Helen remarked. "He's always been special," William confirmed with paternal pride. "But doctor, after everything he's been through, will he really be able to handle strangers, unfamiliar places?" Helen smiled knowingly. "You know, Mr. Thompson, animals who've endured trauma and found their way home often develop an extraordinary empathy for others' suffering. I believe Duke will be a natural therapist." In the days that followed, Duke began his heart treatment at the clinic of Dr. Sarah, a partner of the foundation Charles had mentioned. To everyone's surprise, the dog showed impressive resilience. responding well to the medication within the first few weeks. Meanwhile, Helen helped William formalize Duke's enrollment in the therapy program, effectively neutralizing the threats from the condo manager. Mrs. Jenkins, when confronted with the legal paperwork and a subtle mention of potential legal consequences if she continued to block a therapy animal, the woman backed down, grumbling only about exceptions becoming the rule. William's life, once so monotonous and lonely, had completely transformed. The small apartment that used to feel so empty now overflowed with life. Duke, even while recovering, brought joy to every corner. Yet one mystery continued to haunt William. Where had Duke been during those 10 years? Who had cared for him? How had he survived? And most importantly, how had he ended up in Boulder, so far from the gas station on Interstate 87, where he'd gone missing? One afternoon, as they strolled through the city park where they'd reunited, they encountered an elderly woman walking a miniature poodle. When she spotted Duke, she stopped abruptly, covering her mouth with her hand. "It can't be," she murmured, stepping closer cautiously. "This dog, he looks exactly like Prince." A shiver ran down William's spine. "Excuse me, ma'am. Prince?" The woman, who introduced herself as Grace Sullivan, a 75-year-old retired teacher, explained that for nearly 8 years she had cared for a golden retriever who looked just like Duke, whom she'd called Prince. The dog had mysteriously appeared in her backyard in 2016, thin and injured, about 6 months after Duke had disappeared. He had a deep wound on his paw, as if he'd walked a great distance. I tried to find his owner, posted ads, took him to vets to check for a microchip. But nothing, Grace said, her teary eyes fixed on Duke. For 8 years, he was my only companion after my husband passed. William felt a lump in his throat. What happened to Prince? Grace's face darkened. About 2 years ago, my daughter had to move to Washington, D.C. for work. My arthritis got worse and I couldn't care for him properly anymore. So she took him to a friend's family who had a farm near Boulder. She sighed deeply. 2 months later, I got word that he'd run off during a storm. They searched for weeks but never found him. Duke, who had been watching the conversation with canine attentiveness, slowly approached Grace. He sniffed her outstretched hand and, to William's astonishment, gently licked it, as if recognizing an old scent. My God, it really is him. Grace dropped to her knees, hugging the dog, who responded with quiet affection. How is this possible? Where did you find him? Right here in this park, 3 weeks ago, William explained, feeling a strange mix of emotions, gratitude toward this woman who had cared for Duke for so long, but also an irrational pang of jealousy as she embraced the dog he considered his own. He has a microchip, registered in my name in 2012. I lost him in 2015 during a move. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by distant barks from other dogs in the park. Grace finally stood, drying her tears with an embroidered handkerchief. I see, so you're his real owner, she said, her voice trembling. I'm glad he found you again. He always seemed like he was waiting for someone. William reached out to her. Mrs. Grace, I can't thank you enough for taking care of him all those years. If it weren't for you, Duke might not have survived long enough for us to reunite. Grace squeezed his hand, a sad smile on her lips. He was my companion when I needed him most. I just ask one thing, can I visit him sometimes? I promise not to confuse him or try to take him back. You'll always be welcome in our home. William replied without hesitation. Duke now has 2 homes and 2 families who love him. This revelation filled a crucial piece of the puzzle of Duke's lost decade, but it still left a 2-year gap, the time between his escape from the farm and their reunion in the park. Where had the dog been during that time? The answer came unexpectedly during Duke and William's first official visit to Sunflower Home, a senior care facility in the mountain region of Boulder, as part of their assisted therapy program. While Duke interacted with the residents in the main hall, doling out licks and accepting pets with surprising patience, an elderly man in a wheelchair watched from the corner of the room, visibly agitated. That's old Jack, explained Julia, the home's activities coordinator. He rarely socializes or shows interest in any activities. He has advanced Alzheimer's. But to everyone's astonishment, old Jack began wheeling his chair toward Duke, mumbling something no one could understand. When the dog noticed his approach, something extraordinary happened. Duke rushed to the elderly man, placing his front paws on the wheelchair and licking his face with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Fuzzy! My Fuzzy came back!" old Jack exclaimed with surprising clarity, hugging the dog as tears streamed down his wrinkled face. The scene left everyone stunned, especially the staff who had never seen old Jack so lucid and emotional. A nurse quickly stepped forward, explaining that Fuzzy was the name old Jack often mentioned in his confused moments. "He always says he took care of a big golden dog that showed up in his backyard," the nurse shared. "We thought it was just another one of his mixed-up memories. Old Jack lived alone on a small farm before coming here about 8 months ago." William felt a shiver run down his spine. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. After that first visit to Sunflower Home, William asked permission to speak with old Jack's family. He learned that the elderly man had lived for decades on a small rural property near Boulder, not far from the farm Grace had mentioned. According to his daughter, Jack had begun showing signs of dementia about 3 years ago, but had insisted on living alone until a household accident 8 months earlier made it impossible. "Dad always had a special connection with animals," explained Samantha, Jack's daughter. "When his condition started worsening, we noticed he kept talking about a dog that visited him. We thought it was just his mind playing tricks, but now—" "Did this dog live with him?" William asked, watching Duke interact with Jack again. The old man seemed remarkably clear-headed in the dog's presence. "Not exactly. From what I could piece together from Dad's confused stories, it was a dog that came and went, like it visited him regularly but didn't stay. Dad left food outside, and the dog apparently started staying longer. Especially when his health declined, he swore the dog knew when he wasn't feeling well." Samantha hesitated, biting her lip. "There was even one day Dad fell in the yard and couldn't get up. He insists the dog stayed by his side, barking until a neighbor came to check. If it's true, that dog saved his life." Jack's story fit Duke's timeline almost perfectly. After running away from the farm where Grace's daughter had left him, the dog had seemingly become a guardian angel for the lonely old man. And when Jack was taken to the care home, Duke likely wandered the area until that fateful rainy day in the city park, where fate reunited them. In the following months, Duke became a local celebrity. His incredible story of loyalty, survival, and reunion after 10 years touched the hearts of Boulder's community. The local newspaper published a detailed story, which was soon picked up by larger outlets, eventually making its way to a national television program dedicated to inspiring stories. With the growing media attention, the Golden Paws Foundation received a significant increase in donations, many specifically earmarked for Duke's treatment. The heart surgery, initially considered an unattainable luxury, became a reality. Under the care of Dr. Sarah and a veterinary cardiologist specially brought in from NYC, Duke successfully underwent the procedure, gaining a new lease on life. Meanwhile, the assisted therapy program expanded. The visits from Duke and William became the highlight of the week at several nursing homes and pediatric hospitals in the region. The story of separation and reunion resonated deeply with many patients, especially the elderly, who had lost contact with family or friends over the years. For William, this new phase brought a renewed sense of purpose. At 68, when many of his peers were settling into a predictable routine of loneliness and waiting, he found himself at the center of a small emotional revolution, touching lives while healing his own wounds. At home, Duke gradually regained his health and vitality. His once dull coat regained its shine, his labored breathing gave way to a calm rhythm, and his eyes, once distant and melancholic, now overflowed with the canine joy William remembered so well. Grace became a regular visitor at William's apartment. Duke always greeted her with special enthusiasm, as if thanking her for the 8 years of care. Instead of jealousy, William felt deep gratitude for this woman who had kept Duke safe for much of their separation. He was my companion when I thought I'd spend my last years completely alone, Grace confided one afternoon as they drank tea on the apartment's small balcony. Now I have popcorn, she stroked the miniature poodle in her lap. But I'll never forget what Prince Duke did for me. You can't imagine how comforting it is to know he wasn't abandoned all those years, William replied, watching Duke dozing at his feet. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and check if he's still there, afraid it might all be a dream. On a particularly meaningful afternoon, 6 months after their reunion in the city park, William received an unexpected phone call from Jennifer, his daughter. "Dad, I've been thinking, Robert and I are considering buying that little house in Woodbury, remember? The one near the waterfall we visited last year." She paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. "There's a small cottage in the back that would be perfect for you, and for Duke." William felt a lump in his throat. "Sweetheart, I don't want to be a burden to you. We're doing just fine here." "It's not about that, Dad. After everything that's happened, we've realized how unpredictable and precious life is. We want you close. The boys miss you. And to be honest, Robert and I do too." "What about the cost?" "You know I can't contribute much. The house is practically a done deal, Dad. The cottage would be yours, no strings attached. And as for Duke, the vet said he'd benefit from having a yard to exercise in. Besides, the foundation and the assisted therapy program have branches in Woodbury too. It'd be a smooth transition." After hanging up, William sat beside Duke, who seemed to sense something important was happening. "What do you think, old friend? Another change. But this time we'll stay together, I promise." Duke rested his head on William's knee, his wise eyes conveying unshakable trust. The move to the cottage in Woodbury happened on a sunny Saturday morning. Unlike the disastrous trip 10 years earlier, this time Duke traveled comfortably in William's lap in the back seat of Robert's car, watching the scenery with the serenity of someone who had finally found their place in the world. The property was even more beautiful than William remembered. Nestled on a mountainside, overlooking a lush valley with a small waterfall in the background, the main house was a rustic and welcoming structure. The annex, though modest, had been renovated especially for them, with a doggy door installed, leading to the grassy backyard. "Dad, we want you and Duke to feel completely at home," said Jennifer, pointing out the details of the renovation. "You'll have total privacy, but we're just a few steps away." On that first night in their new home, William sat on the porch with Duke by his side, gazing at the stars shining brightly in the Hudson Valley Highlands sky. Suddenly, he felt a deep certainty that all the pain of separation, all the anguish of the lost years, had a greater purpose. Duke had not only returned to his life, but had brought with him lessons of resilience, stories of the lives he had touched during his absence, and concrete proof that some bonds are truly unbreakable. As if reading his thoughts, the dog rested, his head on his knee, a gesture that now meant so much more than simple affection. It was confirmation that the cycle of loss and reunion had finally reached perfect balance. Weeks turned into months, and months into a year. Duke's health, though requiring constant care due to his heart condition, remained stable. Together they continued their therapy visits, now not only to senior homes, but also to schools for children with special needs in the area. One of the regular visitors to the annex was Grace, who had moved closer after befriending one of the residents at Sunflower Home during one of Duke's sessions. Old Jack, unfortunately, had declined quickly in health, but until his final days, his moments of greatest clarity came during the Golden Retriever's visits, when Duke would patiently lie beside his chair like a guardian of memories the illness tried to erase. On a special Sunday afternoon, nearly 2 years after the reunion in the city park, William's family organized a small celebration. It was Duke's estimated birthday, now around 14 years old, a venerable age for a large dog. Grace came with her poodle. Helen brought a special dog-friendly cake, and even Dr. Sarah made sure to attend. "I never imagined when you two walked into my clinic soaking wet that I'd be witnessing a story that would inspire so many people," remarked the vet, watching Duke receive affection from everyone present. "Neither did I imagine that at 70 I'd be starting a new life," William replied with a smile. During the little party, William's youngest grandson, Luke, just 7 years old, sat beside him while the others chatted animatedly. "Grandpa, how did Duke know it was you that day in the park? After so long." William thought for a moment, remembering that magical instant in the rain when the dog's eyes met his. "Some connections, Luke, are so special that not even time can erase them. Duke didn't recognize me just with his eyes or his nose. He recognized me with his heart." The boy seemed satisfied with the answer, running off to play with Duke, who patiently accepted being the center of the children's attention. Later that night, after everyone had left, William sat on the porch again, just as he had on his first night there. Duke lay beside him, head resting on his leg, a position that had become the physical symbol of their reconnection. "You know, my friend, I still wonder where you were each of those days during the 10 years, murmured William, stroking the animal's ears. "Who else you met, who else you helped, how many other stories you could tell if you could speak." Duke lifted his head, looking straight at William with those deep brown eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. "But maybe what matters isn't knowing every detail," the elderly man continued. "What matters is that in some inexplicable way, you found your way back to me. And I promise that this time, we'll stay together until the end." As if understanding every word, Duke moved closer, resting his muzzle against William's chest near his heart. That night, under the starry sky of the Hudson Valley Highlands, man and dog shared not just physical space, but the unshakable certainty that some bonds transcend explanation, defy statistics, and survive even the most painful separations. The story of William and Duke's reunion continued to inspire people across the region. The assisted therapy program expanded significantly, and the story was eventually turned into a small book with profits donated to the Golden Paws Foundation. Schools invited William to share the story with children, teaching values of perseverance, loyalty, and the importance of emotional bonds. One morning, nearly 3 years after the reunion, William received an unexpected letter. The sender was a retired truck driver, writing to say he had recognized Duke from a television report. According to him, in 2015 he had rescued a frightened and disoriented golden retriever near a gas station on Interstate 87. With no visible identification and fearing the dog might get hit, he took him to Woodstock, where he left him with his sister, who had recently lost her own dog. "I always wondered if that dog had a family looking for him," the trucker wrote. "Seeing him on TV, discovering he finally found his way home after so many years, brought a peace to my heart I can't explain." This final piece of the puzzle filled in the missing gap in Duke's journey. From Woodstock, he had eventually run away again, finding grace in Boulder. The chain of events that connected all these people, the trucker, his sister, Grace, old Jack, and finally the return to William, showed how a series of small acts of kindness had kept Duke alive and well during the decade of separation. In response, William invited the trucker to visit them, starting yet another friendship born from Duke's extraordinary journey. As the years passed, Duke naturally grew older, his muzzle turning whiter, his steps slower and more measured. But his eyes kept the same intelligent, loving gleam, and his devotion to William remained unwavering. During their therapy visits, now less frequent due to both their advanced ages, Duke seemed even more attuned to the emotional needs of the patients. As if his own life experience, the years apart, the temporary homes, the miraculous reunion, had deepened his ability to connect with others' suffering. "It's like he can see the pain others don't," a nurse once remarked, watching as Duke gently rested his head on the lap of a patient who had just received difficult news, even before she began to cry. For William, every day with Duke was a precious gift, a blessing he never took for granted. In the mornings, as he watched the dog sleeping peacefully on his padded bed, he often found himself marveling at the statistical improbability of their reunion. Among all the parks in Boulder, among all the rainy days, among all the possible routes they could have taken, something greater than coincidence had brought them together again. On a fall afternoon, nearly 5 years after their reunion, as they rested in the backyard watching the golden leaves slowly fall, Jennifer approached with a package in her hands. "Dad, this came for you today," she said, handing him a sealed cardboard box. William opened the package curiously, finding inside an honorary medal from the Animal Protection Society accompanied by a formal letter. Duke and he had been selected to receive the Eternal Bonds Award, given to exceptional stories of human-animal connections that inspire positive change in society. The award ceremony, held at the Municipal Theatre in Boulder, was an emotional event. William, wearing his best suit, bought especially for the occasion, and Duke, sporting an elegant blue bandana, received the medal to warm applause. "This story isn't just about a man and his dog," declared the association's president during his speech. "It's about hope when there seems to be none, about connections that survive time and distance, and about how animals can be the purest examples of unconditional love we find in this world." As William stood to speak, he felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Duke sitting patiently by his side, and at the hundreds of attentive faces in the audience. "Many people ask me how Duke managed to survive for 10 years and then find me again," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "The truth is, I don't have a scientific answer for that. All I know is that thanks to the kindness of many people along the way, he had the chance to continue his journey. And maybe on some level we don't fully understand, he never gave up searching for me, just as I never truly gave up on finding him." In the audience, Grace smiled through tears. Beside her, Helen Blackwell, the coordinator of the therapy assistance program, nodded in agreement. Dr. Sarah, accompanied by her team, proudly documented the moment on video. Robert and Jennifer, with their grandchildren, applauded enthusiastically. This wasn't just William and Duke's story, it was the story of an entire community that had formed around them. Life followed its natural course. Duke, now around 17 years old, an extraordinary age for a dog his size, began showing clearer signs of aging. His walks became shorter, his naps longer. His heart medication was adjusted several times, and new conditions emerged, like mild arthritis and hearing loss. William, himself facing the challenges of his 73 years, patiently adapted to his friend's needs. Ramps were installed to help Duke reach his favorite spots. Their therapy visits were reduced but not stopped. Duke still took great joy in bringing comfort to others, even if he now needed more breaks to rest. "You two are truly inseparable," Grace remarked during one of her regular visits, noticing how Duke, even when drowsy, always positioned himself to keep William in his line of sight. "It's as if he's afraid of losing you again." "I feel the same, you know," William confessed. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night just to make sure he's okay, that he's still here with me." On a spring morning, after a peaceful night, William noticed Duke hadn't gotten up at his usual time for breakfast. Approaching the dog's bed, he saw his breathing was slower than normal. "Duke, you okay, buddy?" he called softly, kneeling beside him. Duke opened his eyes slowly, immediately recognizing the familiar voice. With visible effort, he tried to lift his head to lick William's hand, a gesture that had always been his special way of communicating. Sensing something wasn't right, William immediately called Dr. Sarah, who promised to come as quickly as possible. While he waited, he sat on the floor beside Duke's bed, gently stroking his golden fur, now heavily streaked with white. "Do you remember the day we met, my friend? You were soaked, looked so lost," murmured William, silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "You completely changed my life, brought me so much joy, so much purpose. I could never thank you enough for finding your way back to me." Duke, as if understanding every word, shifted slightly to move closer to William, resting his head on his lap. His eyes, though tired, held the same unconditional love as always. When Dr. Sarah arrived, her expression as she examined Duke confirmed William's fears. His old friend's heart was failing. There were treatments available that could extend their time together, but his quality of life would suffer. "Mr. William, we're reaching that difficult moment," the vet said gently. "Duke has had an extraordinarily long and happy life, especially these last few years with you. But perhaps it's time to consider what's best for him." William nodded, silently, a painful decision forming in his heart. After Dr. Sarah left, promising to return the next day for another evaluation, he spent the rest of the day beside Duke. He told him stories of their years together, from the mischievous puppy to the wise, patient companion he had become. He showed him old photos kept in a special album, including one of Duke as a pup. wearing a red bow at Christmas in 2012. Jennifer and Robert came by late afternoon, bringing the grandchildren, who said goodbye to their canine friend with gentle hugs and heartfelt tears. Grace appeared at dusk, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers that she placed near Duke's bed. "You were my guardian angel, my faithful friend," she whispered in the dog's ear. "Now rest, you've earned it." That night, William decided to sleep on the floor beside Duke's bed, unable to bear the thought of leaving him alone for even a moment. He fell asleep holding the animal's paw between his hands, memories of their shared life dancing in his dreams. He woke to the first rays of sunlight and the gentle touch of Duke's nose against his face. To his surprise, the dog seemed a little more alert, his eyes brighter. With obvious effort but unwavering determination, Duke managed to rise from the bed. "Duke, what are you doing, buddy?" William asked, quickly helping to support the animal's weight. With slow, deliberate steps, Duke led William outside through the dog door to the grassy backyard. The rising sun bathed everything in golden light, and dew sparkled on the leaves like tiny diamonds. Duke moved to the center of the lawn, where they often rested on sunny afternoons. There, to William's astonishment, the old dog managed a full circle before lying down on the cool grass, looking up at his human with a serene, almost smiling expression. It was as if he wanted to show William his favorite spot one last time, under the perfect light of dawn. Understanding the meaning of that moment, William sat on the grass beside Duke, letting the animal rest his head on his lap. Together they watched the sun slowly rise over the mountains, illuminating the valley below and the small waterfall in the distance. "How you always knew how to pick the best moments, didn't you?" murmured William, gently stroking Duke's ears. "And the best places too." Duke took a deep breath, his body visibly relaxing as he closed his eyes. William continued to pet him, whispering words of love and gratitude, a final lullaby for his faithful friend. And so, in the serenity of a perfect morning, with his head resting on the lap of his long-lost human, Duke took his last breath. Days later, in a private ceremony, he was buried in that same spot in the backyard, beneath his favorite tree. A small bronze plaque, a gift from the Golden Paws Foundation, marked the site with a simple yet profound inscription. Duke, 2010-2027, not even 10 years apart could break this bond. True love always finds its way home. Duke's passing left an immense void in William's heart, but also a comforting certainty. Their miraculous reunion after so many years hadn't been mere coincidence, but a precious gift that allowed them to complete their journey together. 6 months after Duke's passing, William continued his therapeutic visits to nursing homes and hospitals, now accompanied by Popcorn, the miniature poodle he'd inherited from Grace, who had moved closer to her daughter due to health issues. The little dog, initially shy and unsure, blossomed under William's care, as if Duke had left behind a legacy of love that extended beyond his physical presence. During this adjustment period, William realized he needed to create new rituals with Popcorn. Unlike Duke, who had always been independent and confident, the little dog needed constant reassurance. Every morning, William took her to the exact spot where Duke was buried, beneath the tree in the backyard. During these visits, he shared stories about his great friend as if introducing the two. "You know, Duke would have loved to meet you," he said, watching as Popcorn curiously sniffed the bronze plaque. He had a special way with other dogs, especially the smaller ones. Jennifer, initially worried that Popcorn's presence might hinder her father's grieving process, was surprised by the opposite effect. "It's like Popcorn filled a void that could have swallowed Dad whole," she remarked to Robert one afternoon. "Not replacing Duke, but giving him a new purpose." "Your father is an extraordinary man," Robert replied, watching through the window as William patiently taught Popcorn to shake, a trick Duke had mastered in minutes, but which was a huge challenge for the nervous little dog. Where many would see only loss, he found a new way to carry on Duke's legacy. Helen Blackwell, coordinator of the Therapy Assistance Program, noticed interesting changes in the dynamics of William's visits with Popcorn. Where Duke had impressed with his majestic presence and canine wisdom, Popcorn connected with patients through her vulnerability and need for protection. It's fascinating to see how patients who were once intimidated by Duke now open up completely with Popcorn. Helen remarked during an evaluation meeting, especially the more fragile ones who seemed to relate to her apparent vulnerability. One special afternoon during one of these visits, an elderly woman who had never shown interest in previous therapy activities approached William with tear-filled eyes. "You're the man who reunited with his dog after 10 years, aren't you?" she asked, her voice frail but emotional. "My daughter told me your story. It gave me hope that maybe one day I'll find my son again, the one I haven't heard from in 20 years. William gently held the trembling hands of the woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Evelyn. "If there's one thing I learned from Duke, it's that we should never lose hope. Some bonds are simply unbreakable." That brief encounter marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Mrs. Evelyn, who had withdrawn into her world of silence and pain since being admitted to the home 2 years earlier, began eagerly awaiting William and Popcorn's visits. Little by little, she shared her story. Her only son, Craig, had left for the Amazon as a researcher, and during an expedition deep into the forest, lost contact with the outside world. The official search lasted only a few weeks before authorities declared the case hopeless. But a mother's heart could never accept that, Evelyn confided absent-mindedly, stroking Popcorn's ears. "Just like you never completely gave up on finding Duke, I know Craig is still out there somewhere." Touched by her story, William mentioned the case to Robert, who worked as an engineer for a company with projects in the Amazon region. Robert, ever pragmatic, was skeptical, but promised to make some discreet inquiries among colleagues working in the area. Weeks later, during Sunday dinner at the main house, Robert surprised everyone with a revelation. "I spoke to a colleague who oversees sustainable development projects near the border with Colombia," he said while serving the rice. He mentioned a Brazilian who has lived for years with an isolated indigenous community, helping them protect their land from illegal loggers. "No one knows much about him since he rarely comes to town, but from what I could gather, his name might be Craig." William felt a shiver run down his spine. "You think it could be?" "The chances are slim," Robert considered. "But coincidences happen. Look at you and Duke." Weeks of careful investigation followed. Jennifer, using her contacts as a social worker, managed to recover old photos of Craig from the university archives where he had worked. Robert, in turn, coordinated with his colleague to verify whether the mysterious Brazilian in the Amazon could truly be Mrs. Evelyn's lost son. The confirmation came on a rainy April morning, nearly 8 months after Duke's departure. Robert's colleague had finally managed to find the man and show him Mrs. Evelyn's photo. The reaction was immediate. It was indeed Craig who had survived. An attack by illegal loggers, thanks to the help of indigenous people. Severely injured and temporarily without memory, he had been taken in by the tribe. When he finally regained his memories, he had fully integrated into the community, committing himself to protecting them. "He thinks his mother is no longer with us," Robert explained, reading the email he'd received. When he learned she was still alive and had been searching for him all these years, he was in shock. He's arranging everything to visit her as soon as he can find someone to temporarily replace him in the village. The news was too big to deliver abruptly to Mrs. Evelyn. William, who had developed a special connection with the elderly woman, asked Helen for permission to share the message gradually and carefully. During the next visit to Sunflower Home, while Popcorn distracted the other residents, William sat beside Mrs. Evelyn in the garden. "Remember when we first met, and I told you some bonds are unbreakable?" he began, carefully choosing each word. The woman's eyes lit up with a mix of hope and fear. "Did they find my Craig?" "Mrs. Evelyn, I need you to prepare your heart for news that might seem as unlikely as my reunion with Duke." William then patiently explained the situation, watching her reactions closely, ready to call for medical help if needed. But Mrs. Evelyn, fragile only in appearance, showed surprising inner strength. After the initial shock and a few silent tears, a smile transformed her wrinkled face. "I knew it," she whispered, squeezing William's hand with unexpected strength. "Every night before bed I talked to him, just like you did with Duke. I told him to find his way back, even if it seemed impossible. And now..." Mrs. Evelyn's reunion with her son 2 weeks later was a deeply emotional moment for everyone at Sunflower Home. Craig, a middle-aged man with features weathered by the Amazon sun and gentle eyes just like his mother's, held her in a long embrace, both unable to speak a word. William watched from a distance with popcorn in his lap, feeling an inexplicable connection to the moment. Somehow, the universe had used his story with Duke to spark another miraculous reunion, as if an invisible chain of hope had been strengthened. In the following months, the story of Mrs. Evelyn and Craig's reunion became as well known as William and Duke's. Together, the two narratives created a phenomenon the local press dubbed the Miracles of Boulder, inspiring others to resume searches they had given up on or to reconcile with distant family members. For William, this new chapter brought an unexpected dimension to Duke's legacy. Not only had his loyal friend transformed his own life in the years after their reunion, but now, even after his passing, he continued to positively influence the world around him. One particularly meaningful afternoon, nearly a year after Duke's passing, William received a surprising call from Dr. Sarah, the vet who had cared for Duke. "Mr. William, I'm calling for a very special reason," she said, her voice brimming with restrained excitement. "Do you remember the DNA sample we collected from Duke for cataloging in the assisted therapy program?" "Of course I do," William replied, intrigued. "Did you find any issues with the results?" "No, nothing like that," the vet quickly clarified. "Actually, we received an alert from the National Canine Identification System. Hare family in Aspen registered a golden retriever puppy with genetic compatibility to Duke. Apparently during all those years, Duke, well, he left descendants." The revelation struck William like lightning. Duke, his faithful companion, had continued his lineage during their years apart. At some point in his journey, he had mated with another golden retriever, and now as one final gift came the news of a possible direct descendant. "The family expressed interest in meeting you when they heard Duke's story," Dr. Sarah continued. "Of course, there's no obligation, but I thought you'd want to know." After a few days of reflection, William decided to accept the invitation. Robert and Jennifer offered to accompany him on the trip to Aspen, a mountain town not too far away, known for its cool climate and European-like landscapes. The Thompson family welcomed them into their charming Alpine-style home on the outskirts of town. Paul and Rachel, a middle-aged couple, explained they had adopted the puppy, now 4 months old, from a local shelter after he was rescued from a nearby rural area. "When we registered him officially and did the DNA test to check his breed purity, we never imagined we'd find a connection to such an extraordinary story," Paul remarked as he led them to the backyard, where the puppy was playing with the couple's teenage daughter. When William saw the little golden retriever, his heart nearly stopped. The puppy had the same distinctive spot on his left ear that had made Duke so easily recognizable. His eyes, a deep and intelligent brown, seemed to contain the same soul. "The resemblance is incredible," murmured Rachel, watching William's emotional reaction. "When we saw Duke's photos in the system, we were amazed." The puppy, whom the family had named Atlas, cautiously approached William, sniffing him with intense curiosity. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he sat exactly as Duke used to, his head slightly tilted to the side, as if analyzing every detail of the elderly man's face. "This is extraordinary," remarked Paul wide-eyed. "He's never done this with anyone before." The visit lasted all afternoon, with William sharing stories about Duke and admiring Atlas's playful antics as the puppy grew increasingly comfortable in his presence. Before they left, Rachel made an unexpected proposal. "Mr. William, we'd love for you to stay in touch with Atlas. Maybe regular visits? We feel there's a special connection here that shouldn't be ignored." On the drive back to Boulder, William remained silent, processing the day's emotions. Finally, as the city lights came into view in the distance, he shared his thoughts with Robert and Jennifer. "It's as if Duke left me one more gift," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just the memories we shared or the purpose he gave me through the therapy program, but also this little piece of him that will live on through Atlas." In the following months, William established a routine of monthly visits to Aspen. Atlas grew quickly, developing a distinct personality, but with surprising echoes of Duke's traits. The Thompson family, delighted by the special bond between the elderly man and their puppy, always welcomed him with open arms. During one of these visits, nearly 2 years after Duke's passing, Paul surprised William with a proposal. "We're considering enrolling Atlas in the therapy program when he's a little older," he explained. "We'd love for you to help us with the process, sharing your experience with Duke." The idea of helping train Duke's descendant to follow a similar path moved William deeply. It was as if the circle had come full, as if Duke's legacy of love and service was finding continuity through a new generation. Somehow the story of William and Duke lived on, touching hearts and inspiring people, a tangible reminder that love, in its purest and most unconditional form, has the power to transcend time, distance, and even human understanding. Meanwhile, in Boulder, William's life took on new dimensions. Inspired by Mrs. Evelyn's successful reunion with her son, he began collaborating with a local project called Lost Links, which helped elderly people reconnect with distant relatives through social media searches and public records. For someone who had never been comfortable with technology, William surprised everyone, especially his grandchildren, by dedicating himself to learning the basics of the internet. Luke, his youngest grandson, now 9, became his personal tutor, spending Saturday afternoons patiently explaining the mysteries of search engines and social media platforms. "Grandpa, you're getting really good at this," the boy exclaimed, one afternoon as he watched his grandfather skillfully navigate a genealogy website. "Pretty soon, you'll be teaching my parents," William smiled, affectionately ruffling his grandson's hair. "I have an excellent teacher," he replied, "and good motivation. Every family we help reunite feels like reliving a little of the joy I felt when I found Duke again." The Lost Links project quickly gained recognition, initially in Boulder, then throughout the mountain region, and eventually on a national scale. The inspiring story of William, combined with tangible results, over 30 successful reunions in just 18 months, caught the attention of the media and garnered support from tech companies that offered resources and training. Meanwhile, his visits with popcorn to senior homes continued, now enriched with stories of the family reunions he helped facilitate. The once timid little dog had developed surprising confidence, especially around William, as if absorbing some of the elderly man's calm and determined energy. On the porch of his annex, watching the sunset over the mountains, William often felt a familiar presence beside him. It wasn't sadness that visited him in those moments, but a deep gratitude for the privilege of having lived a story that defied all odds, the story of a man and his dog who, against all expectations, found their way back to each other after 10 long years. One such contemplative afternoon, with popcorn asleep in his lap and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the tree where Duke rested, William found the words to express what his heart had long understood. "Some encounters are so extraordinary," he thought as the sky turned gold, "that their beauty stays with us long after the time we've spent together, not just as memories, but as living forces that continue to shape our paths and touch other lives, weaving an invisible web of hope and possibilities." A golden leaf detached from the tree, floating gently until it landed beside the bronze plaque. William watched this small sign from nature with a serene smile. Duke had found his way back to him after 10 years. Mrs. Evelyn had reunited with her son after 2 decades. Atlas carried Duke's lineage, perpetuating his presence in the world. And now, through the Lost Links project, dozens of other families were rediscovering bonds that had seemed irrevocably broken. It was as if the miracle of his reunion with Duke had sparked a wave of small, everyday miracles, each one echoing the most important lesson his faithful friend had taught him. Hope, when nurtured with true love, has the power to bridge any distance, overcome any barrier, and, above all, keep a light burning even on the darkest days. And in that thought, in the warmth of that certainty, William found not only peace but a renewed purpose that extended far beyond his own story, a living legacy of the extraordinary love between a man and his dog who, against all odds, found their way back to each other. End of story. Dear listener, did this story touch your heart? Tell us how it made you feel and where you're watching from. If Duke and William stirred emotions in you, share them in the comments. Is there any purer love? We'd love to read your thoughts. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe for more heartwarming stories.